Welcome back Chessbox Worldwide. You know I love a good slugfest, and in this round 9 of the National League clash against Ugandan champion Were Samuel, we got exactly that. Samuel, the reigning 2024 Bungoma Open Chess champion and the powerhouse from Kireka Chess Club, brought a dynamic edge with the deadly Budapest Defense as black. I, Sanya Derrick, thought I was firmly in control, but after a stunning pawn sacrifice by black, the position absolutely exploded. Get ready for brilliant attacks and a king hunt that went right down to the wire here at the center of African chess. Did I manage to survive the storm, or did the tactical fireworks lead to a checkmate? Hit that like button, subscribe for more African chess action. Let's dive into the carnage. In the white pieces, I opened the game with 1d4, and the reigning 2024 Bungoma Open Chess champion Were Samuel played knight f6, played c4, he played e5, introducing us the Budapest Gambit, of which I accepted. I played pawn takes e5, and he played knight g4, hitting back on the pawn on e5, knight f3, bishop c5. Now the pawn on f2 is being hit, e3, defending the pawn, knight c6, a3, just intending to go ahead and expand on the queen side for the future benefit. He played a5, stopping any further expansions. Then I played b3, intending to put my bishop on b2 and take control of the whole of this diagonal. Samuel played knight takes e5. In this position, I played bishop b2, but however, h3 should have been considered. For example, after h3, then knight takes f3, pawn takes f3, knight f6, bishop comes to b2, d6, and now h4, queen comes to e7, h5, rook g8, and knight comes to d2. And this is an interesting continuation for white, and it promises a fighting game. But however, after knight takes e5, I played bishop b2. Samuel went on and played queen f6. But however, knight takes f2 sacrifice was going to be a very dangerous move in this position. For example, knight takes f2, sacrificing the knight, and in case of king takes f2, then knight g4 check. After king comes to e2, knight takes e3, hitting on the queen on d1. Queen comes to c1, queen e7, intending to do a discover d, check. Queen comes to c3, knight takes c4, check. After king comes to d1, knight takes b2, and after queen takes b2, short castling. This is a very interesting position, and black is dominating, and white has lost all the castle rights. But however, after bishop b2, he played queen f6. He was baiting me. In case I go ahead and play knight takes e5, then queen takes f2 is checkmate. Even knight c3 is a nice one, is an interesting move. But I played rook a2, defending my bishop instantly. Played queen e7, went back with the queen. I played knight c3, intending to bring the knight on d5 and hit on the queen, and also threaten to take the pawn on c7. Knight takes f2 still would work in this position. King takes f2 still, knight takes c4 this time round. Now we start the bishop and the queen and the knight itself. They are putting pressure on the pawn, which is on e3. So bishop takes c4, we see queen takes e3, check, king g3, queen f2 check. King going here on h3, then we could see pawn moves to d5, hitting on the king, check. And in case of pawn moving in to stop the check, and now pawn comes to h5. Queen comes into e7, check. Queen takes, rook takes. White has two hanging pieces. The bishop on c4 is hanging, and also black is threatening to take the pawn on g4. So this is all a dominating position. So however, after knight c3, he played c6, defending the knight d5 idea, h3, hitting on the knight, knight takes f3, queen takes f3, and he played knight e5, played queen g3, I'm hitting on the pawn g7, knight g6, bishop e2, then short castling with a nice continuation, but I wanted to kill Samuel. I played h4, intended to go ahead and play h5, so he played bishop d6, hitting on the queen. So queen comes into g5 is an interesting continuation, but I didn't want to extend queens at the moment, so I played queen g4, intending to go ahead and push h5 and take the pawn on d7. So he played h5 himself, queen e4, bishop e5 was interesting, threatening to go ahead and take the knight on c3 in check, and now the queen, which is on e4, would be hanging. But however, I could also go ahead and play knight f4, now hitting on the bishop instantly, at the same time also threatening to bring the knight on b6. So d5 would be interesting. I would take the pawn, he takes the pawn, queen takes d5, and bishop e6. And I can tell you, this would be a fighting position. But however, after queen e4, someone played knight e5, and then I played bishop e2. So he went for short castling, which was a brilliant move. I played bishop takes h5. In this position, Samuel went all out to me. He played f5. I played queen c2. Samuel went and played f4. But however, even b5 was an interesting move. Take the pawn, now bishop b7. The bishop will be hitting on the pawn which is on g2. So after queen c2, f4, I went on and played e4. But however, knight e4 was interesting. In case of pawn takes, I would take the pawn, and after queen comes to e6, I played knight g5, hitting on the queen and threatening checkmate in 1. And in case of queen comes to h6, g4 is interesting. Knight f3, the king e2, hitting on knight, bishop comes to c5. In this position, if I happen to go and take knight on f3, so look at this, the queen and the bishop and the rook, they are all putting their eyes on the king, and it will be very dangerous for me to go ahead and play such a position. But however, after f4, I played e5, and Samuel went on to sacrifice his pawn. He played f3, sacrificing the pawn in order to rip apart the position. Bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, and after pawn takes f3, he played rook takes f3. Queen e2 should have been considered, but I played rook g1. For example, after queen e2, hitting on the rook, queen f7, supporting the rook and also inserting pressure on the f2 pawn. And after e5, hitting on the bishop, bishop comes c5, knight e4, and in this position he will play d5, sacrificing the bishop. And if you look at this position, in case you go ahead and take the bishop on c5, the bishop is going to be coming in on g4, putting the rook, putting the queen to be pinned, and this would be very, very, very dangerous to play against. But however, after rook takes f3, I played rook g1, simple queen takes h4, was an interesting continuation. For example, after queen takes h4, would have seen queen e2 and rook f7. This would be interesting and a playable position to be played against white. But however, after rook g1, he played bishop e5. The simple knight d1 was interesting, followed up by f4, but I played king e2, hitting on the rook, and he played queen f6. Then I played knight d1, he played d6. Then in this position, f4, for example, after f4, rook comes to f4, king comes to e1, bishop e6, bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight e3. After d6, I played c5. Samuel went on and played b6 in order to open up for the bishop to hit on the king. But however, bishop e6 was very interesting. Now it is hitting on the pawn which is on b3 right now, because now it's supported by the rook which is on f3. So after pawn takes d6, bishop would take the pawn on b3, and now queen c5, still maintaining an eye on the pawn which is on f2. Bishop goes back, bishop takes knight which is defending the pawn, rook takes d1, and after bishop takes b2, rook takes b2. In case of queen takes b2, I would play king takes f3, rook f8 check, king g2, and after queen e2, rook g1. After c5, Samuel played pawn b6, and I played pawn takes d6, bishop s6 check, and after king e1, rook d3 was very strong, followed by knight coming to e3, bishop comes to d4, and knight f5. This was so interesting, because now if you look at this position, the rook is putting an eye here on the pawn which is on d7, and also the bishop and the knight and the bishop are looking at this bishop. But after king e1, queen takes b6, and now I've got an initiative. I played bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, then I played queen takes c6, hitting on the rook, at the same time also defending my pawn on e4, rook d8, rook d2 was so interesting, but I played rook g5. For example, after rook d2, you would have played rook takes d2, king takes d2, rook d3 check, king comes back to e1, queen h5, and then now it's that the queen h5 is threatening to go ahead and win the knight and also checkmate. So queen e6 check, and after king h8, queen g4, queen e5, queen comes to g5, queen takes e4, knight coming to e3. Still the game is playable, but it's a fighting game. But however, after rook d8, I played rook g5, and Samuel played queen d4, insisting on to checkmate and win the knight which is on d1. I missed my chance to beat the reigning Bungoma champion, because there was an interesting queen e6 check, checking the king and also at the same time defending the pawn which is on e5. And in case of the king can't go to h8, because rook coming to h5 would be checkmate in 1, so king is forced to come to f8. Then I play rook d5, Now there's no time to win the knight, because now because of the intermezzo, the rook takes d5, queen takes d5, and after queen takes d5, e takes d5, rook takes b3, and after rook b2, so rook takes b2, knight takes b2, and after, in case of king e7, I play knight d1, and after king d6, I play knight e3. So many interesting combinations to check the king, win the pawn, and also the bishop can still come in. All these, and then play bishop coming to e3, bishop coming to e4. So many interesting combinations can be here. But however, after queen d4, I made the worst mistake of my life. So in my mind, I thought that the queen is still watching over the pawn on e4. But now I went on and played rook d5, giving up the pawn on e4. And instantly, the reigning Bungoma champion went on and took the pawn on e4. I tried with knight e3. But now, in this position, so many interesting combinations to win the game. Even the simple check can also win. There's queen check here on b1. There's also rook sacking the knight, and so many interesting combinations. But someone just went for the simplest. He played rook takes e3, and after f takes e3, it was in this position I went on to resign on the game, and the Bungoma champion, Were Samuel, went on to win the game. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in your game. Make sure you go ahead, like, subscribe, and comment to support the channel.